as a vegetarian, I'm somewhat against animal research, although I can see why it's necessary in some cases. With me today are some young people from Cambridge here to give their views on animal research.
I'm Jack. Unlike Billy, I'm not a vegetarian, and I am in most cases for animal research, as until biomedicine discovers something else we could use as an alternative, it is the best that we have.
I'm Robin and I'm undecided.
I'm Charlie, I'm a vegan and I'm against animal testing because I believe exploiting animals is wrong.
Okay guys, thank you for your views and we'll come back to you at the end of the show to see if you've changed your mind. But to start our journey, we head to the Babraham Institute to find out more.
The Babraham Institute is at the heart of the UK's life science research, and it's situated just outside Cambridge. Focusing on the field of basic cell and molecular biology, the Institute's been responsible for some of the biggest scientific developments in this field. There's no question that the Institute's research has changed lives and vastly improved our scientific understanding. So where do animals come into this? Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Klaus. I work here at the Babraham Institute. I'm a group leader in immunology.
And what are you working on at the moment?
So my research group is an immunologist, is in immunology, and I work on a family of enzymes called the PI3 kinases. So these are enzymes inside cells of the immune system. We focus mostly on T cells and B cells, so these are the immune cells that respond to vaccines. And we look at the effect of inhibiting PI3 kinases, both on the fundamental immunology, how the immune system develops in the absence of these kinases, but also in terms of vaccine responses, immune responses to cancer. And most recently we've started working on a disease that was actually discovered here in Cambridge, which is called activated PI3 kinase delta syndrome. And patients with this disease are immune deficient, so they have a very poor immune system, they have frequent infections from early on, and this is an inherited disease.
And how is it that animals come into the research that you do?
Yeah, so the animal research is an important cornerstone of immunological research. We do a lot of work initially with cell lines and other approaches, but really to understand how the different cells of the immune system work together to raise an immune response, you really need to work either with an animal or with a human. So as an example, if you have a tissue culture dish and you add T cells and B cells to that tissue culture dish and then drop a vaccine on top of that, nothing will happen. The vaccine really only works once you inject it into an animal, and the T cells then over the next week or so have a chance to work together to drive a powerful immune response. So that's a lot of the reasons we have to work with animals as well as with humans.
And what are the benefits of the research that you do using animals?
So you can imagine that it's proof of concept. There are many drugs now being developed which couldn't have developed without the fundamental insight offered by animal research. So first of all, you really have to know what the different cells of the immune system are, and this has largely been discovered in immunology from experiments using mice. And then being able to manipulate these immune cells either by removing or adding back receptors or molecules inside these cells. And it's once you have this understanding that you can then start thinking, actually, I think I have an idea for a drug here, how a drug might work. You'll then test that idea in the animals and eventually bring that through to the clinic.
Have there been occasions where you've weighed up the alternatives and then decided not to go ahead with any animal research?
There certainly have been experiments where we feel the severity of the experiment we would have to do would be too high for us to be acceptable. And then we have thought of alternative experiments or sometimes even changed that line of research. We are increasingly trying to use human cells to do some of our research, and we can get blood samples, for instance, from the local hospital. And actually, as another example, sometimes we can expand some cells that we've taken from a mouse, and we make lots of frozen aliquots of those cells. So that means that next time we do an experiment, we don't necessarily go and get more mice, but we can go to the freezer and use those mice again. So that's something we've become much better at over the year. For some experiments, we are able to use what's called immortalized cell lines. So that may be a B cell or a T cell that's been taken out of either a mouse or a human some years ago, immortalized, it can grow indefinitely in cell culture.
Thank you very much. There were some really helpful answers.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
So I'm Nora, I work at the Babraham Institute. I'm an animal technician but also supervise one of the animal units at Babraham. So we work under ASPA, which is the Animal Scientific Procedures Act. Within that grants a licence to the establishment to be able to perform work, and under that a project licence is created, and we work closely to that. And then the people that perform the procedure, so myself, we have a personal licence which is given to us by the Home Office following taking separate module exams, and then that enables us to do the work with the animals. It gives us strict guidelines that we have to stick to as well. So we have animal care staff that work in and they look after the animals. That's everything from daily health checks with them, making sure they've got food and water, up to cleaning out and performing any procedures that may need to happen with the animals. So the majority of our animals are super clean. They don't carry many pathogens, especially nothing that's particularly harmful to us. We do have an area in the unit where mice are given pathogens which can be transferred to us, so things sort of like flu and things, but we all have special precautions in place. We have additional health screening, and there's really strict SOPs and things in place so that we follow the procedure, and there's never been any issues with any cross-contamination or infection from the animals. The majority of animals don't experience any effects on their health, but there's probably about 10% that do, and those animals are given extra special care and attention. So I think people are becoming more open to animals being used in research. I think people are more understanding of this, and I think that's because places such as here are more open about the work that we do. We'll talk about it, we'll discuss it, and I think that it's been seen in a better light than it ever has before. A lot of the animal rights groups, they have photos and information, and it is from a very long time ago, and I think things have changed now. Obviously the law's a lot stricter and everything's quite regimented, so there isn't the information that there was previously. Also we're more open about the work that we do. We let people come and visit the facility. We've got cameras in the facility, people can come in and see what's happening, so we're very open about what we do, and I think that's helped. People have got a better understanding now than they ever did before.
Using animals for life science research has undeniable benefits, and cosmetic testing has been banned in the UK since 2009. What ethical judgments do we still have to make? She's in the studio to tell us more.
Here with me today is Katelyn Murphy, joined with Joseph Knight, who in November 2015 created Stand Up, a youth group campaigning for animal rights at just the age of 14. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for coming.
So, what were your motivations for starting Stand Up?
I found out what goes on in the animal products industries and skins, and I decided that I wanted to do something about it more than just I could do myself, meet other people who were interested in, and just come together to fight animal exploitation.
Under what kinds of circumstances would you condone animal research?
So as we said, there's so many different types of animal research. So animal research like putting tracking collars on wild animals, I would support that because it allows us to learn more about how the animals behave, and that allows us to help them more in the wild by stopping illegal activities like poaching and things like that.
Do you think animal research should be made illegal?
That's hard because animal research is such a general term and incorporates so many different types of research. I mean, research can be from going into the wild, into the jungle and tagging animals and following their progress, which, you know, that doesn't have any impact on the animal, that's absolutely fine, to, you know, very, very harsh vivisection, which is personally, morally, completely unjustifiable in every way, shape and form.
But what kinds of research are you supportive of?
I'd say it's justifiable when the results of the animal tests minimise suffering in general for both people and animals. So minimising the overall suffering that occurs. For example, we have say we have a sudden outbreak of polio or some terrible disease which just goes through the country and kills so many people. In which stance I'd say testing on, say, 10, 15, 20 animals, even hurting them in the process, is justifiable because you're saving millions of lives and preventing suffering from millions of people.
There are so many alternatives to animal research that are often superior. For example, toxicity tests are, they've been shown only about 60% reliable in mice, whereas 100% reliable when we use human cells and tissue. And as we're not mice, we're not rabbits, we're not monkeys, so it's very different, and so many side effects have come out when we started using the drugs on humans that haven't shown up in animal tests. We cured cancer in mice decades ago, but we still haven't found a cure for humans, so it really isn't that reliable.
There were some really good answers. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
I think it comes down to the scientists to decide.
I think that it's rather pointless since we've already had so much research done into animal testing and whatnot.
It's not really nice experimenting on them when they've done nothing wrong.
More bad because animals are animals and they don't deserve to be treated just like toys. So I think it's more bad than it is good.
I think the good outweighs the bad. As far as so far, animal research has helped, us cure many diseases. But in many ways, there's research being done for like makeup and stuff. So I think that's kind of unnecessary.
Before we discuss animal research with our panel, we first head to Cambridge University to talk with a professor of biochemistry. Please note that any footage of animal research seen alongside the interview is shot in a different facility off-site with a disclosed address.
I'm Gerard Evan. I'm a professor of biochemistry at the University of Cambridge, and I'm also funded by Cancer Research UK and various other cancer charities. So I'm interested in the molecular processes that drive and maintain cancer. And there's been a huge explosion in our understanding of cancer over the last few years, and we're looking at the possibilities of drugs that will really treat many, if not all, cancers at some point in the future. So I'm interested in what it is that makes cancers tick, what holds them together, what maintains them, so that I can basically find ways of disabling that and making the cancers go away in patients. So I work exclusively on mice, and the reason we use mice is because of two reasons. First of all, they're quite close to humans. Rodents and primates are not that dissimilar, 60 million years of evolution apart. There are clearly differences, but a lot of them are not that significant. And secondly, over decades, there have been very successful attempts at inbreeding mice and building strains, and they've been then bred into genetically identical animals. So every mouse is, as best as it can be, genetically identical to every other animal. And that cuts down all the variation, so we can see what's actually happening without the noise of what happens in outbred populations like, say, human beings. Well, I'm particularly interested in how cancer cells interact with the cells around them, the normal cells. So cancers are deranged tissues, not clones of cells. And we now know, over the last 20 years, that the cells that around that cancer cells interact with and instruct are absolutely critical. Most notably now the immune system, and we know that blockading the immune system and interfering with the immune system and how it's regulated can come up with very new therapies in cancer. You can't model that in any way other than to have a whole organism. You need the whole organism and its immune system and all the other cell types around. So because I'm interested in that, that's why a lot of our experiments involve the use of animals. Well, there are many alternatives, and it's driven by purpose, not by process. So if I could simulate everything on a computer, I'd do it tomorrow. Nobody wants to work on animals if they can possibly avoid it. But the fact of the matter is we don't know nearly enough to be able to simulate things in computers. We could also work in a tissue culture dish, in media, but there again, we can't model what happens when the cancer cells interact with the immune system and the connective tissue around and the blood supply and so on and so forth. Every experiment we ever do, we have to abide by this philosophy of the 3 R's. which is reduction, refinement, and replacement. So whenever we apply to do a particular experiment on our licenses, we have to demonstrate that there is no alternative and that we've done everything possible to keep the animal numbers down, to make it statistically meaningful, and then of course to refine our experiments so if we can, we don't use animals at all. The ethics of animal research is that I think it's relatively simple. Nobody wants to work on animals if they can avoid it, but if you really think that that's the only way, and I actually do, that we're going to develop better treatments for cancer in human beings, then I think it needs to be done. So animal testing, as I understand it, is using animals as test tubes to test for cosmetics or something that doesn't really affect human lives. I can't get along with that. I think that's appalling and completely unnecessary. The work I do and the work that a lot of people do who are trying to model diseases like cancer in animals, we're doing it because we're trying to find ways of curing the disease. That's the only reason that we're doing it. And I think ethically that's totally different from animal testing.
From everything we've seen so far, especially from the general public, there seems to be some confusion between animal research and animal testing. So Charlie, what's the difference between the two, and are they necessary?
So to me, animal testing is the testing of cosmetics or medicine on animals to see whether it would be suitable or not for humans. Animal research is looking at different factors that affect animals in an environment not related to humans. And cosmetics is completely unnecessary. And animal testing and medicine, it's also becoming a lot more unnecessary. You don't have to do it anymore. There are other methods you can use, and we are moving towards that. But obviously it's not going to change overnight, so it needs to be a very slow process.
Now, what's your point of view?
I think some alternative methods are a lot better than animal testing, but I think also you have to do some animal testing because otherwise you won't really know how it will react on humans, so you can't completely base it just off computers.
Do you think we could perhaps use humans instead of animals?
Well, they do, up to a certain stage. But I think it would be even more unethical, at least for humans, as far as humans are concerned, to start using humans sooner.
So if they've consented to it, then?
Well, yeah, but like they might have consented, but they might not have made informed consent.
If you donate your body to medical research, then that's probably okay. But just randomly kidnapping a human.
I mean, like I've been doing some research myself, and I've looked at scientific papers where they've given animals illnesses, and then once they've done whatever they wanted to do with them, they would kill them. They wouldn't rehome them or whatever, they'd just kill them. And to give an animal an illness and make them very sick and could be fatal when there are humans that might consent to being tested on that are already sick, I don't think that's okay.
So you're saying that they can put an animal to death, basically, but they would never really do that to a human?
Yeah.
So in essence, you think these laboratories that are carrying out these experiments that put human lives above the rest of animal lives?
Yeah, they do, which is understandable, but at the same time, I just don't think it's okay to make an animal sick purely for the lives of humans. Obviously, it's important.
Robin, what do you think of the fact that animals could be treated differently if they were in domestic settings or if they were in farm settings or lab settings?
Well, I think that they need to be treated differently sometimes because you wouldn't start testing on your cat because you don't have the facilities to test on your cat, hopefully.
Don't know what you're doing with your cats.
But I can understand. But I think all animals should be treated in a safe way to minimise their pain. But I can understand why they'd have to be treated differently.
Charlie, what's your opinion on all of this?
So, yeah, I mean, I think if you could do something to an animal and abuse it and get arrested for it, then why should you be able to do that in an animal testing environment and not get arrested just because you have a licence?
But I suppose that's to help the medicine, isn't it? Whereas you kicking your cat or something isn't going to be helping anyone, is it?
Well, no, it's not. But I mean, you're not going to be helping these animals, are you? You're going to be killing them and making them sick.
Well, you're going to be helping the humans.
The suffering of one animal in comparison to the prolonging of hundreds of thousands of lives.
A lot of animals get tested on even just for one drug. It's not just one animal.
Even still.
And I mean, that depends on your own ethical values, like what species you value as higher or lower. So that just depends on who you are, really.
Fair enough.
And so generally, does good outweigh bad or the other way around?
I think good definitely outweighs the bad. I think the fact that we've come so far as so many things that could potentially have wiped out millions of humans have been saved by animal testing. It speaks volumes about how beneficial it has been.
I think you have to decide for each individual case. So for someone there isn't an alternative that will be effective, then you should use animals, but if it can be avoided, you should avoid it.
Right, so generally for this moment in time with the technology we currently have, animal testing is basically the best method. Do you think that in the future potentially we could have, like we were talking about computer simulations earlier, would that be more beneficial than having to use these animals?
If you can find a way of doing it without, well, because when you're doing computer modelling, you have to have a preliminary thing upon which your model's based. If people are doing it at the moment, that is still done using animals. If you can find a way of doing it without using animals, then definitely, but until then, animals are still a massive part of it.
Also, it costs a lot less to use a room full of computers than to have rooms full of
labs upon labs full of animals.
Yeah, and also there's a psychological effect of having to look after the animals and watching mice be killed or animals killed.
So, do you think that those regulations could be changed to give the animals more enrichment?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, enrichment is a major part of an animal's welfare. I think even just on the husbandry side of things, changes need to be made to give these animals, even if they are being tested on, better lives and suitable lives for their each individual needs of each species. But I agree with you guys are saying, like in the future it would be good to have no animals, but it's not going to change overnight. But I think it's important to move towards that.
And are there any organisations that are going about changing that?
Yeah, there's the Dr. Hayden Trust, which is solely dedicated to finding alternatives. And there are a lot of other trusts and organisations and charities like that are working towards that. Also, a lot of laboratories now are trying to slowly change away from animal testing.
And do you think this is the right way to go, to decrease animal testing as much as possible?
In the future, yes, but like I said, until we've reached a stage at which we can do that, animal testing is still the best way forward.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the less animals that are harmed, the better.
So we've heard a lot about the ethics of animal research, and the general consensus is that it's a necessary evil, but that can be quite an uncomfortable standpoint. So what do you think? Get in contact with the programme at this website or at our Facebook and Twitter pages. I'm Billy Poynton, and this has been Impact.